Okay. It is 6 o'clock, and it is the 1st of November, if you can believe that. And I am going to call the City Council work session to order. Would you all please stand with me to say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you. Take a quick roll. So, Councilman Owen?
Present.
Councilman McGoffin?
Present.
Councilwoman Diamond?
Present.
Councilman Burns?
Present.
Councilwoman Kesty?
Present.
Councilman Allen?
Present.
And Councilman Lavaca?
Present.
Excellent. Okay, moving on to, we have no unfinished business tonight, so moving on to our new business, which is actually 2024 utility rates. I'm going to turn this over. Mark, are you going to begin with this? Perfect.
Yes.
All right,
you.
excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. This is our annual review of our three utilities to see if our rate system is properly supporting our operating and maintenance costs in our capital projects and ER&R funds. And so this is tonight a follow-up to a Public Works Committee meeting that was held on October the 11th. So three of you have already heard this presentation, but we wanted the entire council to be given pretty much the whole presentation. We have Karen Johnson here tonight, who has done a review of the sewer utility for us, and she'll be presenting that in just a few minutes. You've seen her work in the packet that you have there with you tonight. She did a detailed update and review of the sewer utility as just basically a carrying on of the work that was done for years by Katie Isaacson, and so I think you'll be glad to see the detail and the time put into that. So basically some background information on this. In looking at the rates, we will take a look at the Consumer Price Index, the urban one for Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue. And on page 2 of the memorandum, or page 3, the numbering system there, you have kind of a recitation of what the CPI-U has been over the last 4 periods that we looked at and what we actually adopted in terms of our utility rates. So for instance, in 2021 to 2022 period, in fact, I'll start back a little farther, 20 to 21, the CPI-U was 5.2%. We had adopted 2.3% coming out of our 2019 sewer utility update, and we used that also for stormwater and solid waste as well. We did a blanket 2.3% increase in that year. Then in 2022 and 23, the CPI, 21 to 22, the CPI, the effects of COVID really come in force. We had a 9.0% CPI, and we were still working with a 2.3 adopted rate. We needed to correct that and did do so in the review done for the 22-23 period. The CPI-U was 5.4%, we adopted 4%. So that's kind of a broad background. What the utility rate structure supports, basically operations and maintenance, and that includes, of course, our AFSCME workforce plus staff that supports the utilities. That consists of their benefits, which have been going up in prior years around 7 to 8%. They were a little better, predicted for 2024 at 4.1%. And then also the agreements themselves, the labor rates or the wages that we pay to staff. In prior years, we were looking at around 2% average. It went up to 3.75 in 2022, and then 4% in 2023. And of course, we have the salary grid that we've taken on now, and that provides for some bumps among the steps that we have as well that also affect the cost of the utilities. In addition to the operations and maintenance, and also we have the general costs of doing business in terms of costs of materials that we purchase, road products, pipe, that kind of stuff, that have also been reacting kind of in tune with the CPIU. Equipment repair and replacement, that's the fleet of vehicles. We have over 120 vehicles between our various divisions, of which about 60, some of those are public works vehicles. We have been seeing over the last couple of years a pretty significant increase in the cost of these vehicles. I quote a couple of examples there. Public safety apparatus have been about 26% higher than budgeted recently. And that's been kind of a moving target, too, because we will have placed an order. This happened with the ambulances, you may remember. We will have placed an order, and then by the time they actually get it into the queue to produce a chassis, for instance, we're finding that they're coming back for increases at that time. And you saw that with the $18,000 increases in the chassis that you approved a couple months back. I guess the good news on that front is they're finally getting them actually out of the factories, and we took delivery of one ambulance this week. So, and also the two support vehicles that fire uses. On the public works side of things, we've been seeing over 20% on recent vehicles there. The most significant ones, we ordered 2 trash trucks, as you know. You approved those recently, and they were quite a bit more expensive. So what I do every year, as we actually purchase the vehicles, I will go back and reset the bar in the ER&R on how we calculate for our annual deposits from the various utilities. I'll cost that out over the lifespan of the vehicle, include inflation, and then divide that by the lifespan. And that's how much each utility pays into the ER&R to support the purchase of the next vehicle when it comes around on its due date. So those have been pretty significant increases. For instance, I quote in the subsequent information that the increase on solid waste was around 23,000, I think was the number I have in there on that. And that was after going back and really, Leo and I carefully looked at what we could do in terms of lifespan of the equipment to make sure we could kind of minimize that cost. We actually increased our lifespan by a couple of years for the solid waste vehicles to try to mollify the effects of that. And then finally, we have the capital improvement program, which is generally funded in the case of the sewer utility by the general facilities charge that we do. And we've been adjusting the general facilities charge in tune with the percentage we come up for the rates, just to keep that moving ahead in step with the effects on the costs for the system. I also mentioned that the county city council has adopted a comprehensive financial management policy, CFMP, and we seek to have a ending fund balance in the utility at the end of the year of about 16.67% of cash balance plus revenues. And I've addressed that in the information you'll see following, as well as Karen will talk about that, and striving to meet that goal, that council goal in our management of the utilities. For the utility, the sewer utility itself, Fund 401, just a couple of things I'll point out in parameters that I gave to Karen for her updating this. We continue to have challenges there with getting qualified operators. As you know, you authorized an additional Class 2 operator over a year ago with the approval of the 23 budget. We were not able to fill that position. We simply couldn't get applicants for that. And so we've gone to Plan B on that, and we have hired an operator in training, an OIT. It takes about 2 years to get them up to snuff, depending on their level of experience when they come to work for us. But they're basically a green employee. We've generally been hiring mechanics to do this. We recently hired one that actually had some water treatment experience, which was a little higher, and we're hoping that that particular OIT will come up even faster. And I want to point out to you that we're looking at hiring a third OIT. We had hired one at the end of 2022 in order to have a little bit of buffer personnel-wise Part of the problem with the scarcity of qualified operators is there's some poaching going on also among the various agencies. And so as we train operator and training candidates, they're going to become targets for others. And so we strongly recommend having an extra one working for us. We kind of need it anyway. We're at that stage in our growth. And so we have put that in the numbers that you see, one more OIT position. And we would like to hire that person with the approval of the 2024 budget going into 2024. Some of the other dynamics that are going on with our operators, we have one out right now with a back injury that's going to be out, had surgery today and will be gone at least a month and a half, maybe 2 months as he heals up. Our longtime lead operator, Ralph Kennedy, is off right now with bereavement, a very tragic situation he has taken. Ralph is planning to retire. He hasn't set an actual date yet, but sometime in the next year or two, he'll be retiring. So the other idea on this OIT is we'll get another operator trained so that we can move up somebody from within the ranks to fill that lead position and not have to hire another person when he does finally go. So it's a pretty important succession plan to be doing this, and strongly recommend that we do that. This particular utility is fairly healthy, as you'll see from the numbers, and can afford to do that without any major impact. I also want to point out, I noted in the text there that we share a custodian position among solid waste, public works operations, and administration. We currently have a part-time employee for 3 days a week. We're finding we're really stretched to get everything done. We had Ray Fox for years, and he was a superstar custodian. He was a guy that kept his head down and just did everything. The one that we replaced him with is a good man, but he is not Ray Fox, and he simply can't keep up with all of that Ray was doing for years. And we've been pushing him pretty hard, and just are finding that we're not quite keeping up. And I get some pretty regular complaints from the various departments about the status of the maintenance. And so Nathan's proposed that we convert our part-time position to a full-time position. The main impact that has on us is the benefits that come into play. And so we've baked into the rates for the sewer utility and the solid waste utility enough additional funding to cover the additional 2 days plus the benefits for that operator. And I wanted you to be aware of that. If you do approve this, and the actual 2024 budget will come to you in the form of an amendment first part of the year next year, that's when that really will come into play. That's when you approve that budget, you will have approved those positions, and we would go forward. So at that time, if you don't feel that that's justified, that would be the time to deal with that. But in terms of the analysis that you see tonight, I have included those in that. Okay, and as you know, I've said many times now that we have a two-tiered plan for reviewing our capital improvements at the wastewater treatment plant. We have projects that we've been working on for a couple of years using rate revenue, not any debt, to do some upgrades to the plant to get it up to the point where it can actually handle the capacity we are currently permitted for through the Department of Ecology. We had a vessel, or an anoxic tank, that we have not been able to use for the 22 years or so since it was put into service, because of it being located on top, or the laboratory operations building being located on top of the tank, and it wasn't properly thought through by the design staff at the time. The odor problem prevents its use, and so that was why we funded and built the new wastewater lab building, which was recently completed with council's support. And so we are ready to demolish the old building and put it back into service. We've been working on getting the equipment back into service, and that's just about done and ready to go. So that project and some other follow-on projects with the digester system we have in our capital plan for the sewer system that was reflected in the sewer system plan approved in 2019, 2020. Those short-term projects, all from rates. And then in about 4 or 5 years, we're going to be looking at a major plant upgrade. We're at 22 years since the last upgrade right now. In fact, I guess the days and the years seem to fly, don't they? But that was done in 98, 99. We're 2023, so you can do the math. We're close to 24 years now. So the equipment, some of it's just wearing out, and we are getting somewhat close to our capacity. That we're permitted for both flow and biological treatment. We're fine on biological treatment, but for flow, probably within the next 2 to 3 years, we'll be hitting the magic 85% of the permitted amount, where we will be required to do a facility plan to look towards upgrading the plant to meet the future growth that we would expect for the following 20 years. Very expensive process. The estimate in the capital plan is over $18 million. That's one that we've inflated somewhat optimistically, and will have to be looked at carefully as we go forward in our planning that we're doing. But that's the numbers that are used right now. So that's kind of the long and short of the sewer utility and the backgrounds and the data that we gave Karen to do her analysis. And so I'm going to turn the time over to her now and let her give a presentation. Again, it's a kind of a repetition of what we did on October the 11th, but she has added a little bit of additional data as well. So Karen?
Thank you, Mark. Good evening, City Council members. I'm glad for the opportunity to be invited here to kind of walk through the analysis detail for your consideration. So I am just going to share my screen, make sure we can all see everything. Okay. Okay. All right. Is that visible?
Yes. Woody, can you increase the size of that some? Or Karen, can you?
I think I have it on going the full width. Let's see what I can do. Fit to width. That might be about as big as I can get it.
Okay, thank you.
Can we see it okay?
Well, it's a little hard to see from where we're sitting. That's a little better. That's better. Thank you.
Well, I'll try to highlight some of the numbers. I know it's small information when you're doing, a lot of detailed numbers, kind of hard to see on the screen. But I was first going to just kind of go through the summary of what we've prepared in terms of scenarios for your consideration. We've prepared 3 scenarios, basically with each scenario varying the level of increase proposed for the rate and connection fees. Each of the 3 scenarios assume the same level of cost escalation for each of the scenarios. So I'm just going to give some highlights first on what these scenarios look like, and then go into a little bit more detail. So scenario 1, we looked at projecting the 2024 cost escalation and rate and fee connection increases at 5%, and that's consistent with what we're seeing for the historical 5-year CPI, excuse me. The current year-to-date, I think when we looked at this was August, was about 6.8%. But when we look at it kind of on an average 5-year annual basis, it's 5%. So we thought that was a reasonable assumption for going forward. And then future years would assume 4% per year cost escalation and associated rate and fee increases. And that assumption is based on looking at the trend over a 10-year period of what the CPI increases are. Scenario 2, again, assumes the same cost escalation of 5% in 2024 and 4% thereafter. But we've assumed the rate and connection fees would increase at 4% per year, consistent with what your prior year in 2023's rate and fee increases were. And that's also consistent with the 10-year historical CPI. Scenario 3, again, assumes the same cost escalation, but assumes rate increases at 3% per year. I'm going to just jump down to this first column. section here on the scenarios where we're looking at each one for this assumed cost and rate and fee increases. Just taking a look back to 2023, the rate and fee increases were at 4%, and that compared to the actual cost escalation for the year of 6.8%. And then we have our scenario one, again at 5% in 2024, and then 4%. Scenario two, 4%, and 5%, 4% cost escalation. And scenario three is really shown for informational purposes. But the 3% increase is lower than what we're currently seeing and expecting in the CPI trends. But this was the forecast that was provided in the prior rate study update done in 2022. So we just wanted to show that here for your consideration. Then the things that we're going to look at, I'm going to kind of highlight the significant differences between some of these scenarios. First, looking at the sewer rate impact. So under scenario one, assuming that a 5% increase in 2024 and then 4% increases for the remaining period. So we're looking at total projections from 2024 through 2030. The average annual monthly rate increase over that time period under scenario one would be $3.32 compared to $3.20 for scenario two and $2.32 for scenario number three. So kind of jumping back up into the right-hand corner of my screen here on the comments, we're really looking at trying to, focusing on, scenario one being the kind of ideal recommended approach, scenario two being a feasible approach. Scenario three does have marginal results that kind of leaves little room for contingencies. So I've highlighted some of the major differences between scenario one and two in my comments, essentially looking at for less than $1 increase in the rates above scenario two by 2030, scenario one would provide for increases to the total annual rate funded CIP by over $300,000. And why this is important is it moves us a little bit closer to best practice, where we're looking to have rates fund kind of the repair and replacement portion of the CRT. So that's a positive impact in the scenario one. It also improves the annual financial position over the time period by about $68,000. This is essentially your annual cash flow, your revenues minus your expenditures, which allows you to add monies into your reserves. And in the end, it generates about an additional $400,000 in your combined operating and capital cash reserves available to fund future capital projects and other contingencies that come about. Scenario two is feasible. It does reduce the risk compared to scenario three. This has slightly less financial performance than scenario one. And then noted below, scenario three complies with your financial policies, but I don't think probably moves you that far into kind of progressing into safeguarding your revenues and expenditures and kind of setting the stage for your future needs. I'm going to jump down then to under this sewer rate impact. So it would be $94.10. So your current rate, I'm going to back up a little bit. Your current rate is $70.83 per month. At the end of this forecast period in 2030, under scenario one, that rate would be $94.10 compared to $93.20 for scenario two and $87.10 for scenario three. All of the scenarios are going to have the same assumption on using cash reserves to help reduce the future debt that's going to be necessary for the wastewater treatment plant upgrade that's going to occur around 2027. The prior analysis assumed that there might be about $1.5 million in revenue available to help fund that project. With our update and everything, it's looking like perhaps a little bit more might be available, looking at about $3.5 million to be able to kind of reduce that debt need of about $3.5 million taking that cash from a combination of reserves in the operating fund and in the capital fund. So that scenario remains the same through each scenario. And then that would result in, as Mark mentioned, the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. It's about $19 million planned for in 2027. So if we're assuming about 3.5 million to be cash funded, then the remaining need would have to be debt issue of about $13.2 million. That would be issued in 2027, assuming that that's when the treatment plant would be needing the funding for the upgrade. And that would result in debt service of just under $1 million per year, so $931,000 per year, beginning the year after construction, so around 2028. And that debt service would continue for the 20-year repayment period. The next kind of significant piece that varies by the scenarios is this CIP cash funding. So the portion of your capital program that's funded by cash, your current practice has been to use a combination of monies from 410, which is the capital fund, and rate funding the CIP from your operating reserves. Under scenario one, about 4.2 million of that money would be coming from your capital fund and about 3.3 million from the operating fund. This is the area where suggesting that the best practice would probably want to see moving the majority of that cost into being funded through rates for the portion of your capital projects that's for repair and replacement. And then saving your connection fees for things like your upgrades and expansion charges. So this is the area where sort of identified for each scenario how much funding comes here from this line here from the rate funded CIP, with higher values being a more positive financial result. So under scenario one, you'd be funding about 44% from your rate revenue compared to 40% for scenario two, and then a fairly low amount under scenario three of about 23%. Next area is this kind of combined annual additions to use of reserves. That is essentially the money that you have after paying your expenditures, so your revenues minus your operating expenditures. And again, this gives you the cushion to fund additional projects and the contingencies, save reserve for future spending. Under scenario one, it would be about 527,000 at year 2030 compared to about 450 under scenario two, and then a pretty marginal amount under scenario three. And this is kind of where the suggestion is, that there's really not much room for error under scenario three. Ending cash balances in the sewer fund and the capital fund, about evenly split, about 2.2 million. Ending cash reserves and operating about 2.9, and capital so about $5 million. Ending balance at the end of 2023. So this would be how much money is left over after this current 10-year CIP has been funded, including a wastewater treatment plant, and that would be the amount available for going forward to help fund your next CIP. Under scenario two, the total would be 4.6 million, and then under scenario three, 3 million. And so under Fund 401, this $2 million, that's essentially what your balance would be in the operating fund. And then we compare those to, what the targets are. As Mark had mentioned, you have the financial policies where you're looking at having about just under 17% of a cash balance of your cash balances and operating expenditures. And this line down here shows what you would have above those minimums. Again, as extra cushions and dollars available to set aside for your future CIP. So under scenario one, you have a total of about 2.6 million. in excess of your minimum reserves, about 2 million under scenario 2, and about 600 or so thousand under scenario 3. So these are kind of the key differences between the scenarios. When we were presenting the information at the committee meeting last month, a question came up on, when we're looking at these cash balances here, what are the, what's kind of an historical cash balances. So from the prior meeting, I added this chart here that gives a little preview of, what the cash balances will look like compared to historical spending. So starting back in about 2019, that's when, the major effort has been for really essentially setting rates and building reserves to pay all your operating and then really prepare for this wastewater treatment plant, a large project in 2027. So historically, the combined cash balances between the operating capital funds have ranged from about 4.6 million up into, the projections for 2023 of about 8 million historically. And so this is sort of, follows the plan. There's been, an effort to try to put as much money in these reserves to help come up with this dollar amount to buy down the need for a higher debt issuance for that treatment plant expansion. So this is kind of our starting point here of cash balances in 2023. And then moving forward, I've shown how how you see the decline in the cash balances by scenario over time. The purple is scenario 1, the green is scenario 2, and the gold is scenario 3. So for all scenarios, you can see that the balance is declining over time. And again, that's as the capital project is being executed. This decline in 2026, that first jump in decline is for the wastewater treatment plant design component of the project that's planned for 2026. That would be cash funded, and it's about $2.1 million. And then the next decline in the cash balances comes in 2027, and that's after using about $3.5 million of the cash balances to buy down that debt. And then you can just see how, as it continues to, remain relatively steady with new connection charges and stuff while we're coming into the cash balances between then in 2030. So for scenario, I'm just going to jump to looking at 2030. For scenario 1 at 2030, here's where we end up at about that $5 million mark. And then about 4.6 for scenario 2. So we would end this study period right about the same position that the utilities were in 2019 as it began building for the wastewater treatment plant, whereas scenario 3 is quite a bit lower, down about the $2 million mark. And I think we have, personally challenged in trying to, build that CIP balance up in order to fund your future capital projects without having to issue additional debt beyond what is being issued for the wastewater treatment plant. Next, I just have some slides. I'm going to go through all the words, so mostly just kind of focused on the graphic here. Essentially, for the analysis, we updated both the operating and capital funds for their revenues and expenditures and the CIP that was completed to date, and then looking at what's been happening with growth. So the historical projection for number of new ERUs is pretty similar to what we're using here. 2023, for 2022, there was just a slight dip. I think it was projected at 70 ERUs as well, and came in at 67 ERUs, so that's very close. So our future projections are staying pretty close in line to what you've been seeing for projections over the last few study updates that you've done. This section just reiterates what the cost escalation and fee increases is under the scenario 1. So the rest of this detail I'll be walking through is basically based on the scenario 1 proposed increases of 5% in 2024, followed by 4% per year. it just kind of highlights what the single family rate bill impact would be over the time period. So with the 5% increase in 2024, it would be about a $3.54 per month rate increase. Then just seeing you around 3 to 3.5, back up to about $4 per month over 2030. And then that last column shows where the connection fee would go, assuming these rate increases. So your current connection fee is $9,256, and assuming the 5% and then followed by 4%, it would grow to about $12,297. And again, these are projections that are, based on this 1 year. We do have a practice of updating this analysis every year to make sure that the projections are kind of keeping on track and making adjustments as we go forward. So the real focus is for recommendations for the adjustments for 2024, but keeping an eye on how they look for the remaining projection period. They're just kind of looking at what these what sewer rates actually pay for. So this is kind of a buildup of what the cost requirements are that need to be funded by your rate. We've gone through and we've done a 4-year history, 2019 through 2022, and your budget for 2023 used as the baseline for our projections going forward. So this bottom bar is your operating and maintenance expenditures. So our forecast starts with the 2023 budget. It includes that new position for the operator and training, and then essentially just shows it increasing by the 5% escalation in 2024, and then the 4% escalation going forward. On this kind of dark green box is the kind of routine capital outlay from rates. The gold bar is the debt service, just showing how that's projected with your existing debt, and then new debt coming on board, and I'll show that detail down below. And then the top bar is the CIP that would be funded by your rates. So this just kind of shows the incline of what your expenditures are. Just highlighting the debt service, your existing debt service. So you have typical work trust fund loans that have different schedules for payoff. So the big decline in your current debt service is some payoff in 2027. It's the first time it reduces, and then all of your existing debt will be paid in full in 2028, which is the same year that the new debt service would occur. So just as your new debt was being paid off, your old debt is being paid off with your new debt of that $931,000 is added onto here. So roughly, 1 year of over $1 million, dropping down to the 931,000, and then keeping in mind that this 931,000 debt service payment would continue into the future for the 20-year period, and it also assumes that by the time we get to 2027, it's still feasible that there's $3.5 million in cash available to buy down that debt. It's also possible that there could be more cash available at that time that could reduce this debt issuance. So that would be something that would be carefully looked at with each of your rate updates up through 2026, 2027 to kind of determine what that feasible strategy is. Looking at the CIP, again, the CIP started in 2019. We've gone through and updated everything for the projects that have been completed, and an update of what the schedule is to completion through 2030. The CIP was originally designed using 2019 dollars, current year dollars back in 2019. So we have projected those cost increases at about 4% per year from 2019 up to the date of expected execution, based on the 5-year engineering and use record construction cost increases. And that's essentially to make sure that, at the time that the capital project was executed, is probably going to cost more than it was originally estimated in 2018. And so just kind of wanting to make sure we match that with some estimations for cost increases. Again, the green bar is the annual conveyance projects. The darker bar is the wastewater treatment plant. There's some miscellaneous improvements that have been made. And then, of course, 2026, this is the design piece of the wastewater treatment upgrade. 2027 is the construction. Again, that's currently estimated at about $18.9 million. And then, so once we take a look at, what's the remaining capital needs, we want to put together kind of a funding plan to make sure that the rates and the revenues and the projections that we have align with being able to meet those annual funding needs and, end up with balances that meet your criteria for minimum reserves. So the primary changes I noted before from this update, from the prior update, was it was previously assumed that the $1.5 million would be used to reduce that borrowing, and we believe that there's the potential for additional funding of about $3 million. So that's this key piece in here. The rest really just identifies, this is the annual expenditure plan, how much is coming from your rates and your connection fees. Essentially, this is all the cash spending, and then $3.5 million in 2027. That's using your reserves. The proceeds from the debt issuance of $13.2 million. So basically, we're just wanting to make sure that we have identified annual funding sources that equal your annual capital spending needs over the study period. And then I'll just again highlighted what that debt service is. So that's just kind of a recap of some of the information we've discussed. And then finally, just kind of looking at the overall picture of what it looks like on a combined basis for your operating capital. In 2023, we start with about $7.2 million. And then that, we add into that your rate and utility taxes are about $4.8 million. And then about $650 from connection fees. And then some miscellaneous revenues from some interfund loan repayments, interest earnings, and some other miscellaneous fees. So your cash resources, vary from year to year, but essentially go from about 6.3 million up to about 7.2 million over the study period. That covers your forecast of operating and maintenance expenditures, which are planned for about 3.7 million for this year. And then it increases annually with the inflation as well as the additional costs for the operator and training. Existing debt service, again, currently about 600,000, reducing every year as the principal is paid off and then ending in 2028. Again, it reiterates what the need is from rates to pay for the cash spending of the capital and to pay for the debt service. And it has your total cash resources here, which is your total revenues, your total expenditures, and then you look at this net additions, annual additions used to reserves. Essentially, that's positive, that's money that's added to your reserves each year. If it's negative, that's that your reserves were used in a given year to pay for some capital project expenditures, which is totally expected. And so, we don't want this to be get too low. This is kind of where we're looking at what we identified by 2030 for scenario one. We have about $500,000 here at the end that your rates are generating that much in addition to your current requirements that can be put into reserves to help plan for your next set of the CIP rules. It just reiterates what the ending fund balances are, and then the use of reserves and how much you have left at the end of the study period. So about $8 million declining down to about $5 million, and then the balances after executing the CIP. This compares it to the target. So your operating reserve target is about $1.4 to $1.5 million. The capital reserve minimum target is thrown at $1 million. That's noted, that's a minimum target. The higher balances, of course, would be more would be, favorable, given that, it provides you the resources for cash spending and capital, so you don't have to over rely on debt issuance for your capital needs. And it just shows what the surplus is over time, which is going to help provide for contingencies and plan for the next CIP. So that is the summary. And if you have any questions, I can certainly reshare that and answer any questions you may.
Any questions? Go ahead.
Actually, my only question was, I was looking at the total current debt versus the current reserves. I'm guessing we're gaining more money on having that invested than paying off the debt.
I'm going to reshare here to make that easier to discuss. So where were you looking at so I can point to this?
Sorry, let me go back here. You know what, go ahead and see if somebody else has a question. I'll find it and get back to you.
It's
Okay,
page
sure.
8. It's page 8. There you are. That should be it.
Madam Mayor, I'll just ask a question. if
Yes, go
there's
ahead,
time.
Councilman Lavaca.
So on the 4% one, option 2, that's going to, and maybe this is for Mark, that's going to do the OTI and the full-time, part-time to full-time. That'll be wrapped up in within that option B.
Correct.
And then option A is at 3%. There's a pretty big jump from the 3% to the 4%. Is that just compound interest? Because it doesn't look like it jumps that much when you go from 4 to 5.
In terms of the rate impact,
Well, yeah, and the amount of revenue that's generated and how it comes in. The rate impact isn't like tremendous, but it looks like with just that 1%, it increases a lot of revenue coming in.
yeah, it's,
Yeah,
Just
it's
compound.
definitely the compounding effect of, if you do a 5% increase upfront, that compounds every year compared to a 3%, it's quite a bit difference in revenues.
Okay.
yeah, and remember on the numbers on the first page of this, those are over the 10-year period, so that, it's not a year thing, it's an average over the 10 years.
And you're thinking the 4% is probably a wise move. Is that what you're thinking, Mark?
Yeah, I don't think that scenario 1 makes fiducial sense for us. I mean, it does meet the reserve requirement, but just barely. We're right there. And as you know, these are pretty uncertain.
Thinking backwards. 3 is the lowest.
I'm sorry, yeah, scenario 3, I'm sorry. Scenario 3 would leave us, I think, at risk in these uncertain times we're in terms of rates and all the rest of that. And we have the plan to review this yearly and take a look at it. And if it needs adjustment or if it's coming out much better than was anticipated, we can adjust for that. And if it's worse, then we have to look at that as well. So that's the key for this whole process, is to continue to look at this on a yearly basis and examine the actual CPIU and the other factors that are coming into play.
Karen, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Councilman McGoffin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question was regarding the inflation that we were calculating for the CIP. Was that at 4 or 5% per year? I forget what the slide said.
With the CIP, it was 4% per year. And that's based on a construction cost index here. So when we look at what we're increasing the rates, rate operating expenditures and rates, it's typical to look at the consumer price index for urban customers for the operating side. On the capital side, the industry practice is to use a construction cost index, the most common one being the engineering news record. And we look back at that for the 5-year period to make that estimation of 4%.
Okay, thank you. I think my concern would be like for the capital purchases of the equipment, from what we're seeing with the vehicles, is there a chance that, in 5 years, if we're seeing these crazy hikes on equipment, that when we go to purchase some of the equipment for the plant, that it's going to be much higher than what we've anticipated?
I would anticipate it is going to be higher. Again, we used I think it was about I don't remember the exact number, it was around 3% in the projections for these numbers to inflate the 2019 estimates for these various projects. And of course, we've had some years of much higher than that, and especially with equipment, that's gone up quite a bit. That's the other argument for staying conservative, keeping our cash balance higher. I would rather you, in 28, 2029, whoever's looking at this has some cushion to work with than be needing to come back for a large rate increase to cover those costs when they come in. Now, again, we look at this yearly, and we also have the facility plan itself coming up, and when they do that, we will get engineering. There'll be still preliminary estimates, but they'll be much more current for the construction of that new treatment plant. So in fact, we're actually supposed to, in 2024, to begin that facility planning process. That's probably a year early, I'm thinking right now. But sometime fairly soon, we'll start that process. And when we have the facility plan done, we'll take a very close look at that. What is this plant really going to cost? The other unknown is ecology is a bit of a sliding target on what they're going to require us to build. We've worked pretty closely with them, but there are some things with the Puget Sound that they are putting into place that we're still uncertain if we're going to have to meet the requirements that some of the larger plants are going to meet in terms of nutrient reduction and stuff like that. That could add $5 million to the cost of this plant, if they do force us to do that. The indications are that we are going to not have to do that. But it's an unknown, and it's a big unknown.
Right. Councilman Burns, did you find your question?
Sort of. I was looking at our existing debt service on page 13, and I was just curious if what we're paying for that debt interest-wise, what are we paying for that?
Oh, on the Public Work Trust Fund loan? Yeah, I don't actually remember, 2.3? It's something fairly low.
Yeah, it's between 2 and 3, I believe.
Okay. So it's not necessarily worthwhile to pay that off early from the reserve funds that I'm seeing here. That's what I was just curious about. Thank you.
Correct.
Yeah, I suppose we could do that, but at that rate, it probably doesn't make fiscal sense to do that.
Yeah, that's why I was asking the rate. Thank you.
That is a very good point because, and again, we're just making estimates on what this debt service would be because we don't know what interest rates are going to do either, just like we don't really know what inflation is going to do. They kind of change, so those are the other things that we look at. And it's a benefit to have as much cash as possible so you're not forced to issue debt in a year when debt might be really high interest rates.
Okay.
Okay. So, again, no action on any of these tonight. They'll come for a first read on the 8th, and then we'll be requesting your action on the 21st. In the memorandum, I've actually taken the middle road there for what staff is recommending, which is the 4%. Karen has recommended scenario 1 with 5. And it does provide some additional cushion, but I do think there's a fair amount of cushion built into the overall process right now. And again, we can look at this again same time next year, and if we need to be more conservative, we can certainly do that. Okay, so thank you very much, Karen. And if there's no other questions for her, we'll let her sign out, and we'll go on with the rest of the utilities.
Thank you, Karen.
All right.
All right.
Okay, so solid, on page 5, we talk about Fund 412, the solid waste utility, and Leo's with us tonight. I'm going to have him address some questions that have come from council in the preceding 2 weeks. Same basic background as for sewer and much of the same logic. We've had some pretty high increases hitting the system. You will remember in 2023, we brought to you a rate study that we did internally, similar to what Karen did for us externally. We did it pretty comprehensively, though, and you have that fairly large spreadsheet that I handed you that kind of shows what we did in 2023. And we looked at basically all of the revenue-generating sources for solid waste, and look carefully, working with Diane Goss, our billing technician, to come up with good estimates on where we're at with revenues for each of these items. And then we looked carefully also, compared, Leo did most of the footwork on this, how these compare with other agencies as well. The spreadsheet this comes out has, I don't know, a dozen tabs that he did all that work on that, and we didn't want to be considerably out of whack on anything, and so you'll notice that while some of the classes, the 3268, which are the most common municipal solid waste containers, they have some consistent rate increases shown over the period that's given in here, and we actually did it over like a 6-year period. We only printed out here tonight 2023 and 24. But they do continue beyond this. We on the commercial side, the increases are pretty minor, and that's because those classes were covering their costs pretty well, and we didn't want to also get out of whack on those things. So it's a blending and a balancing, and at the end of the day, if you look about in the bottom right-hand corner of that, the increase from 2023 to 24, and it's from 2023 actual present projections to 2024, is about 122,000, which is about 4.4%. And that's what you see in the summary of this. It's not as simple as saying we're going to raise, it by 4% or whatever, because there's so many different classes in here, and we've tried to get all of that in here. The detail is here if you want to look at the detail on it, but that's what it really comes down to. So I've talked about in the memorandum what the utility consists of, and again, we did hire the additional full-time employee that you authorized last year, and that's reflected in our existing costs. And as I've noted, we have sufficient trucks right now to run the utility in its current layout, but we are thinking that probably within the next 3 to 4 years, we're going to need an additional truck. We wouldn't need an additional employee necessarily, but an additional truck to spread out the workload. We are working hard, and with the purchase of the new trucks that you've authorized, we're planning to keep the 2 newest older trucks that are going offline and use them as backup, and we'll have those vehicles available to act as our growth continues. And that's part of the driver here is, we're having additional pickups, additional stops to make on the residential routes in particular, but also in commercial, that is producing additional revenue, but also additional cost for municipal solid waste disposal. On pages 5 and 6, you'll find a comparison of the fund revenues with the costs. And I'm sorry the headings didn't come across very well, but on page 6, you have 412 revenue, 412 expense. The second column are the budgeted 2023. The third column are the actual. And you'll see that our revenues are quite a bit better and our expenses are more than we had budgeted for 2023. They're actually fairly close as an average between the two. And again, it's because we've grown. We've got additional services and additional pickups and additional tipping fees that we're paying as a result of that. For 2023, looking down through the numbers, we end up with an ending fund balance projection of about $600,000, which is a little bit under what we would like to have with our recommended fund balance. But that fixes itself in 2024. It looks like we're going to come out just fine on that. So in the 2024 budget as it stands today, the revenues and expenses are actually a little less than what we're seeing for actuals for 2023. We have already provided figures to the Finance Department to update the budget for 2024, which we'll see in January, to our new projection for revenues and expenses. And that will generate basically a adequate ending fund balance of about $750,000, which meets the council's goals for that. This, the 2024 numbers, the far right column, do assume an average increase of 4.4% in the rates per that table that we looked at a few minutes ago. So why are these costs going up as much? Well, I mentioned the revenues is because we have more pickups, we have more services to handle. That's a good thing. But the other side of it, I'd like Leo to speak to a little bit about. I provided in the additional information, which I put on your desk, a copy of an article from the Skagit Valley Herald that talks about what's happening at the Skagit County facility that I actually haven't reflected in these projections yet, but it's coming. And so I wanted you to be aware of that. Leo's going to speak to that. But he's also going to speak to the fact that our existing recycle fees have gone up quite a little bit too. So Leo, you want to take the podium and speak to that a little bit?
Can you outdo the last speaker?
Well, I'll try to be a little more happy here for you. So, okay, so on the tipping rate, so right now we're currently at $103 a ton for this trash rate. And, I'm not even speaking loud, I'm just normal loud. Okay. Anyway, our tipping fees right now are $103, and what Mark is alluding to there is the fees coming out of Skagit County based on the new tipping fees that we're going to see at the landfill with the new vendor that we got, which both vendors were very close. We're looking at anywhere between $130 and $140 a ton. So I just pre-warning you that is coming sometime next year. That will be substantial at that time. On the recycling rates, the per ton, it's been going up over the years, of course, like everything does. And this last year, it went up 5.7%. So we're now at $194.98 for disposal of the recycling program. And that's why you'll see the increase over the recycling, because we're trying to get that caught up. I identified it, I think a couple of years ago. Well, I actually identified it many years ago that we should be moving it up a long time ago, but council decisions over the past, no big deal, was not to take those big steps. So now you're seeing it as I projected it with our rates here. You'll see that we went up $1 this next year. So it went from 8 to it's going to be 9 in 2024. And that will help us be more break even, if not a little bit above break even. So those are the tipping fees, and that's the pressures we're seeing mostly. Of course, you've heard Mark, wages, equipment is going up, and related to COVID or related to people just wanting to make a little bit more money, that's up for determination with whoever. But a couple things I really wanted to point out in these rates that people don't always see is we have some really neat programs that I think are very beneficial for the citizens, and we get kudos all the time. I mean, from everybody around Seattle, Whatcom, anyway, a lot of places, is our rates include, with these rates, we get our recycling yard down there. Now, it doesn't exactly break even because we try to base it on some of the commodities that we get. So we get a little bit of money for the cardboard. They give us a little bit of money back, get a little bit of money back for metal, but that really doesn't offset the whole program that we have out there. We do get a little bit of money back for the TVs too, but we have light bulbs. We collect the batteries down there. We have a pretty nice comprehensive program. We do take bulk items, and that has been, I mean, we're trying to keep the city looking really nice, and that one I don't want to see go away, but that's what these rates will do, is we get to go out and pick up some of the bulk rates at a lower cost than some of the other cities that I've been seeing around. I mean, Waste Management for Burlington is charging $137 or something for picking up a refrigerator, and we are at $25 with no pickup fee. We just go out and get it because I'd rather not see those sitting around the city. So, and then we do the illegal pickups too, which is a big thing on here. You know, Laura Carr will call me up and, hey, there's a couch sitting over on 3rd Street. We go get it. And that's just included in these rates. So I'd like you to, you know, when you're looking at these, that also takes some of those that you don't really know about. Some of the points that I want to make here is Mark did mention that the commercial rates back in the day, that was your cash cow in the day. You charged the heck out of the commercial people, and then the residential people got a little bit of a break. Well, over the last few years, that has been changing, that model, because you can't keep soaking the commercial people and drive them to, you know, break even costs. They got to make a little bit of money. So that's what we've been doing with that, is I haven't changed the commercial rates in this, and it looks for a couple years it'll be like that. So I think that's a big bonus. And we are trying to get the commercial rates of the commercial recycling rates, we are trying to get those up to snuff. We are considerably behind, but I took the tact of doing it over the course of a couple of years, because I hate to, 40% increase sucks. So, if I can just do it a little bit over the time, it's a lot better. Those are probably the big hits I wanted to talk about there. We are excited about our roll-off services. There is a lot of construction in town, so we are getting the benefit of a lot of our roll-off boxes, which is a really good revenue generator for us. So that's a good point to make, is a lot of that construction also helps us. If we do see a downturn and less construction, we will see a little bit of hit on there, but we'll just have to see how it goes. Is there any questions? I don't have as many slides as the last person, but I tried to make it, Mark and I made it pretty simple. We kept it on this. We did exhaustive studies on what we think is best, and this is pretty damn close to what we can be as the best going forward. Darn close, sorry. I might
Any
say
questions? Councilman Lopaka? Or Councilman?
You were talking about the recycling yard, which I use quite a bit. Is it free recycling for yard waste this Saturday?
It is. Councilperson Diamond did a request at one of our workshops. I took it back and I figured it out and see what we could do. And yes, that is actually also included in your rates, because we won't be getting any revenue from that.
I just went and bought a card, and she says, "Oh, if you wait till the 4th, you can take it for free."
Look at that. The staff is just, yeah, perfect. That's what we like, is, I think this will help. On the side, it also helps us with stormwater. So hopefully people will bring their leaves in and we won't see as many out there. Has been the case the last couple of years when we've done these cleanups. The street sweeper has been a little bit easier out cleaning up, so.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you so much, Leo, for running us through this in the numbers. I did notice that in the 23 estimate that most of that percentage goes to the 20-gallon and the toter, and the low-income 20-gallon toter for like 10%, which isn't a major uptick. But the other ones are at 4 and 2.5 for the majority of the totes that are out there. So that's pretty awesome that we were able to do that. And then none for the commercial rate. Is that going to go on for you said a couple of years, or?
I want to say I am into I think the next time we look at it is in 26, and there is slight increases in 2026.
So a couple of years ago, at RCW passed for part of that recycling program, and part of that was to campaign on recycling better products or moving towards recycling flyers or something like that, mail outs or whatnot. We do see, obviously a lot of, like Chuck has pointed out, or Councilman Owens pointed out, that laundry containers aren't really recyclable. They're plastic, but 90% of the plastic isn't really recyclable. Is there anything to do on the campaigning that side to get more recyclable products in consumers' hands when they put that out? And then also with, we were talking about bigger totes with less frequency at the last year's meeting, at 2022 meeting.
So I have that on here as something that we would like to explore doing. Anyway, let me, if you don't mind, if I could address them in the way you asked them, that would be great. So on the 20-gallon, what I discovered in other consultants' work on other cities and stuff, I read their reports, and then through Mark and I talking about it, the 20-gallon cans are not paying for themselves, so to speak. So we're out there getting just a small amount of stuff with the same truck doing the same services, which is almost equal to a 32. So that's why the 20 gallons going up a little bit higher to get it closer in there. Now, we didn't do it all at once, because that would definitely hurt the more elderly and low-income people. So that's why you'll see that on the 20-gallon end. I will be asking the council possibly in 2025 that we would like to discontinue that and possibly put in an every other week 32-gallon can, or even a once a month 32-gallon can service, because we have some people out there that just put one little bag in their can for the little elderly people that we'd like to, still take care of the best we can, but still get our rates, still get everything covered. So I am putting that together. I just really want to have it in my mind to make sure it works revenue-wise and it works with our system. Back onto the recycled products part. So on the recycled products, I was just talking to Chuck a little bit ago. They have been passing some ERPs, which is the producer responsibility rules at the state level. I don't think we're going to see those hitting probably till next year or so, or really seeing the effects. Plastics is a big one. They have a lot of that, which is the one-time use plastics. There's a rule now with that, and styrofoam that are going to be there. They want to make that go away. So I think you're going to see some movement in the next couple of years on that, but I think it's going to be a slow process. Also, I hate to say it, but that's ultimately the purchaser. Right, us are going to have to pay for that, because they'll, like on paint now, if you ever went and bought paint, you're paying $5 for is it 1 gallon or 5 gallon? Anyway, you're paying a fee for that. So that's the producer responsibility thing. So you'll see that coming up, but I don't think we're going to see it till 2024, 25 start to really take effect. And then on the plastic jugs, I hate to say it, but the bottles and jugs the laundry detergent is recyclable, but maybe not the cap. But I don't know if I'm hearing it correctly, but I think you're talking about all the other plastics, the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, those things. Yeah, we really still don't have a market for that. And I've been looking to see what we can find, but it's really rough on somebody recycling that stuff. And then the third one was...
There was the recyclable, and that was it, but there was, if I may...
Yeah.
The proposed weight went up to 9 from 8, but that's still really quite reasonable considering what we see in the chart. I mean, we add Arlington and Duval into there to kind of split that cost, but the overall, it's less than anything else in Skagit County. For the recycling of the 64 gallons, we don't even use all 64 of ours.
Yes. Yeah, I still think that's pretty good. We do, over the course of time, you'll see 25 and 26, we do want to do $1 per year and try to get it up to snuff at least to the average, if not a little bit below the average cost, which is right now $14.60. And
When you're adding in that average, because you're adding in these high areas, the Arlington, Duval, Marysville, and those are really what's kicking up that average. Is there a reason to add those ones in versus just Skagit?
So when I was doing the study and how I took it is I took those off of like cities, and I believe some of those are still the ones we took off of the study for wages. So I just tried to keep it consistent with what we've been using in the past, just to try to keep it simplistic. So if we used Evolve for the wages for the employees, then I wanted to kind of keep that the same with the rate study here to try to give it, apples to apples, so to speak, even though it does, I know you see the numbers up higher, and that's Snohomish. Oh gosh, is that Snohomish or King County?
Snohomish, Snohomish
Is it
County.
Snohomish?
Yeah.
So it is, yeah, their rates up there are considerably higher.
Yeah. I have a question actually regarding the environmental justice, those kinds of laws and regulations that are coming along. We had one that came through, I think it was about a year ago. I know that the council kind of found it disturbing, but they're coming along. I'm wondering, can you give us an update on what you see happening? When can we anticipate some of that impacting us, and how will that also impact our fees?
Oh, good. That's a great one. Are you talking about the organics bill that they
Yes,
put in?
yeah.
Okay, so as I went through and checked it out, and we really only have one customer that it is going to affect, which is in 2024, and that is the food pavilion. So we just have to get out there and make sure that they're doing an organics recycling program of some sort. We already have an organics program, so we can definitely service them. But that's the most effective, the most one that's going to affect most of the people over the course of the next couple of years, because it phases in, and then there's a point in 2026, I believe it is, that if you produce 4 yards of garbage, which I have all the numbers on how many people produce that amount, they will be affected. They just have to report that they are doing some sort of organics recycling. And I definitely want to work with them. I'll be putting a program together here in this next year to make sure I inform everybody what's going on and to let them know. I like to see things coming from a little bit longer way than letting them know the next year or so. Anyway, we'll get the information out. That's about the only one that I've seen, except for the producer responsible bills that you've been hearing about too, that's coming along.
So along those lines, because I think there are more people who are actually composting, which is actually part of this organic piece, can there be a program that can be encouraged? I know that's a lot of work to put on you, I'm sure it is, but just an idea that perhaps there could be a program that could be put out where those individuals who want to do more composting, who want to take some of that waste and take the organic waste and do something healthy for the environment, that they can do that?
Oh, definitely. I got big shoulders. We put a pile on a little bit more, but it's not too bad. We could do a compost program where we encourage people to do some more composting. Back in Mount Vernon, back in oh gosh, okay, I say last year, but it was probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But they would buy compost bins, deliver them out to the customers, or they would come in and buy them for cost, and then the people can compost on site at their houses. So that's one thing that they could do to help encourage it. We do have our drop-off facility, and then we do our organics on the
Right.
also. So, but if we wanted to do something like that, I don't think it'd take too much.
Yeah, certainly not to put it all on you, but I'm thinking that maybe even the chamber might be interested in kind of promoting this, but also service groups within the area. I bet some of the service groups in the area might be willing to work with us as well. But I know that this is probably something that's going to be coming. I hear more and more individuals talk about it. Even the concerns with the plastics, what the plastics are doing to our environment. So anyway, I was curious as to what you knew. So thank you, Leo. Thank you for all you do.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Anybody
Is there
else?
anything else, Chuck? I'm ready.
What?
You woke him up.
I'm just wondering, are you still gonna come up with a $300,000 deficit at the end of the next year?
No, I think we cured that last time through with the rate increase. Didn't we? We gave you those numbers, didn't we? I don't know if we remember that or.
I think he's referring to if
Was that
you
the Merriman's?
separated out the garbage and the recycling.
Oh, just the recycling doing it itself.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So we do take this as a whole. All these programs pay for the whole thing.
That's good.
Oh, okay. Good, Leo.
All right. I think it looks.
Are we good?
Mike, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very
So
much.
the other thing you've already kind of touched on in some of your questions was the other handout I gave you which was the comparison with the agencies. And, these are imperfect animals. Everybody has different ways of doing things, but I've been working on one for the other two utilities as well that if I can get it together, well, I'm not going to be here next week due to a death in the family, but I'll try to provide that information so you'll have it if that's of interest to you. I would like to say on this that the brown or the gold stripe there, that's the proposed 24 rates. All of the rates for the other agencies are 23, so they are out of whack on that point. But, as a relative thing, we're definitely, kind of at the high end of our locals. There's no question about that, but not significantly so. And I would like to clarify that we do have built into our rates $1.20 to cover the cost of the new facility. And so that's something that most of them probably aren't dealing with. We consciously chose to do that so we could build a new facility. That kind of puts us a little bit higher just on that basis. So, okay. Well, we'll move on to the stormwater utility. This shouldn't take very long. We basically are recommending a 3% increase on this utility. We've looked pretty carefully at the revenues, the budget and revenues, how they are for 23 and then 24. And again, as our metric, trying to make sure that we keep that ending fund balance within the council goals. And we're doing that with a 3%. If we didn't do that, we would probably get down, below that. So that's the recommendation for that. Again, 3% is less than the 5% Karen pointed out, which is the 5-year average that we're seeing. And of course, for this year, it's we don't know for sure, but it's going to be at least 5 plus for 2023. So that's pretty much the presentation. On the last bit of page 7, I've kind of wrapped it all up with what's the individual impact per fund. For 401, just because of the dynamics of how you figure this, even though she used a 4% in her figures, it works out as a net 4.4% increase. It generates another $190,700 based on our estimates. For 412 solid waste, it's a 4.4% increase, as you saw on the spreadsheet, and that's about $121,765 based on our estimates. And then for 425, the stormwater utility, it's a 3% increase recommended, and that's $28,330. These rate increases, while uncomfortable, we don't like to do them. They do keep the utilities solvent, and they meet the council's goals and objectives for having sustainable utility funds, and we would recommend that you do that. And again, I won't be here next week for your first reading. I'll try to listen in if I can. But if you have any additional questions and want to try to get those to me, I'll be around for sure tomorrow, and I'll be looking at emails occasionally for anything else I can answer on that.
All right. Are there any last questions or thoughts for Mark?
I was going to ask Leo one more question. I wondered, has the recycle been pretty clean, or have you had any fines for bad stuff?
Actually, Waste Management, I probably mentioned this in the past, they still say that our stuff is the cleanest stuff, and they really appreciate it. And I got to thank the council for letting us keep doing the recycling, because it's our drivers. I mean, they care. They let people know how it's going. We educate them, and the ones that don't want to do it, they got to gravitate towards more garbage. So we do really. I do want to hit on the multifamily recycling, which is phenomenal here. Like every time I talk to at the state level about this, they're like, "No way, no way." I mean, we have very low contamination. And it's working with those the managers at all these apartments. They're really nice. I have them via email. We talk. I send pictures when it's getting out of hand, and they go and send their letters. And sometimes I produce letters for them to send out to the customers. So our stuff is pretty damn clean, really,
Right.
in the scheme of things.
I know Waste Management's pretty liberal about handing out fines, I mean, including
We have not been fined. Thanks for that, Chuck.
Yeah.
Now we're But that's one good thing about our staff too, is we do have the option, if they see a lot of stuff going in, and we do, occasionally you'll see, I don't know, if they dump 10 cans and there's yard waste in it and just something that we don't want in there, they have the option to go to the dump. And they do tell me, we write it on our list, we keep track of everything, so we know that that was contaminated load and for the reasons why. So we can, make sure everybody knows what's going on in case they
Okay.
ask.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Sorry, too much information, right? Sorry.
No, it's good information. Thank you. Okay, with that, then there is nothing else on the agenda, and we are adjourned. See you next week.